when you are talking about money, that's very interesting because when I was watching Florida Project, it reminds me of another Mike Lee film, All or Nothing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the idea of, all these, people living together in a certain confined community, they're trying to, to live, day by day, in a very, in a struggling economic situation.
Right.
Also, of course, you mentioned your love for Cass, Ken Loach films. I wonder, this impact of British social realism or these directors, how did they influence you? Just in terms of subject matter, or also in terms of filmmaking techniques.
There was something that people don't, I think, talk a lot about with British social realism. I think the best British social realism is where they will, it's obviously, usually heartbreaking material. It's usually, looking at class. It's usually looking at, loneliness. It's the actual subject matter is actually pretty hard hitting. But there are moments of levity that are just some of the funniest stuff you'll ever see because it's based on behavior. And you recognize yourself in that, and so I like the soccer scene in. Do you remember the soccer scene in Cass?
Yeah.
Where the coach is just screaming at everybody, and
no one knows what
takes
to do.
A ball and he'll chuck it at a kid, and then 40 years later, that stuff is now what I consider mainstream comedy, like Vice Principals and Eastbound and Down, but to see that 5 to 10 minute scene in the middle of Kess, which is also, there's just this tragic story, and it's so, you're obviously incredibly moved by what's happening to this little child, but then there's, at the same time, life is still, there's still life there, and life has a lot of humor to it, and you can't deny that stuff. So you have that scene, and I, all of Ken Loach's films always have a scene that is almost on the verge of screwball comedy in a way.
Yeah.
Mike Lee as well, and it has to do with like, you remember in Riff Raff when they go to the funeral and they have they have the urn with the ashes, and they, I don't know what happened, but the wind blows and everyone's being hit by the the ashes, and I think that's what people don't talk a lot about, that with the British social realism, that there's always that levity that grounds it, because without that humor, there's no truth, and I think that's what I've been trying to do with every one of these movies. Like, if I am tackling a serious subject matter, I still have to allow the audience to laugh and to recognize themselves in the human behavior, and chuckle at the human behavior. You're not laughing at it, you're sort of laughing with it, or at the absurdity of the way people treat one another.
But definitely in Florida Project, it's getting more prominent that the idea of an anarchic energy that but in the main characters, because even in Starlet, still Drew Hemingway's character is still very passively accepting her fate. Whereas in Tangerine, I can see the changes, because at least they're trying to battle against the system. There's a will there, and in the Florida Project, it's getting obvious towards the end.
Yes.
So I wonder how did you have this growth of anarchic energies for your characters?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know what it is in my own personal life that draws me, that fascinates me towards that drama. I don't know. I was a taxi driver at one point, and that was really eye-opening to me. A lot of those things that made its way into Tangerine in the taxi, that was stuff that I experienced, like, a woman with her dog and this and that.
You're not even hard yet. Fucking hard. That's hard.
And I don't know what the fascination is, but it's when somebody's driven to the point where, I was actually thinking about this scene in Tangerine the other day, because I did a masterclass in New York, and I had they showed that whole last scene, all that chaos. but that chaos all comes from, there's no outside forces. It's just people clashing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just people existing and personalities clashing. There wouldn't be all that it's not like there wouldn't be all that screaming in the middle of donut time, and there's no like outside forces. Nature isn't bringing all these people together. It isn't like an act of nature, or like there's no money involved. It's just a bunch of clashing personalities, and that's what really fascinates me. Again, there's humor in the identification of like when you see yourself in that, when there's this chaotic moment and somebody's breaking down and screaming and this and that, that passion that comes from that passion of the you think back at the times that you had a moment of which you allowed your emotions to get out of control, and you're like, oh, I remember when I did that. It's silly. That's just silly acting, and it's just that very base level of just human beings can sometimes act a little bit silly, and sometimes we act like children.
But sometimes I wonder, do you feel angry when you dig into your projects? Because these are stories about marginalized people who are having difficulties to live.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you have that urge, to make the films for them, out of an anger, or or any sort of unsatisfying mood towards the the society, the oppressing society?
I think there is, but it's not as if it's
sort
a
of like
crusade.
belly in the fire.
It's more like this is existing, and I can either make a documentary about it or an over-the-top melodrama and try to preach to my audience, or I can just say, let's tell a universal story that just and just show the commonality and the universality of all of everybody. I mean, like, again, like we always say this about Tangerine. The actual story of Tangerine could have taken place anywhere, like anywhere on the. It's a story of infidelity and friendship. So it could actually be like a high school movie. It could the same exact thing could take place in a high school. Oh, he's cheating on me? I'm gonna find that bitch, and I'm gonna and then they have a school fight and everybody gets together at the end. And it could happen anywhere. So I think that our approach to it is not anger, but in a way where it's just like these subjects can be tackled in different ways. Maybe that's in a way confrontational to I don't think to audiences. It's more confrontational to the industry and like the way that they've been representing up to now.
Just offering a new perspective.
Yeah, I think so. But again, I try to be very it's a serious thing and it should be taken seriously, and we take it seriously when we're talking about the movie after. But while we're making it, we're just trying to make a film that is. I always say, like, if I was Maya or Kiki, or if I was one of these motel residents, how would I want to be treated? How would I want to be represented on screen? If somebody was making something about my life, I would I would want them to hopefully just be objective. That's the biggest thing, to be objective, to not try to sugarcoat, and to treat me with just dignity and just like I would treat my friends. So it's more of that's the approach. I don't think it's anger though.
Because you mentioned your love for Ken Loach and social realism, because I also interviewed Ken Loach like many years ago.
Oh, really?
And he told me, if you want to become a director, that like two paths, like you either work in a theater or to make documentaries. That's how you absorb things and how you learn things. And in your lecture you also mentioned the word documentary like quite a few times, but in a different way. You're making documents of the people. So how would you balance this? The idea of fiction and documentary. When they're both in place.
I think essentially, first off, I think that has a lot to do with my editing. One of the biggest jobs of a documentarian is actually the edit. Sometimes the edit is you're taking just archival footage and you're trying to tell a story. Sometimes that's your whole job. It's an edit job. But to answer your question though, I think that I'm a dramatist. So basically, but again, I'm interested in grounded films that are based in reality, based in realism, right? So I have to use sort of documentary techniques to artificially do the same thing. I'm trying to basically shine light on an issue, so I am trying to do what a documentary does. I'm trying to show the world a place they probably haven't seen before. The only thing that's the difference between, I think, what somebody like these narrative features that I do and like pure documentaries are, there's no statistics. You have to get the same point across without relying on elements of documentaries like statistics and facts, etc., text. You're basically having to do a very similar thing. So I approach my editing as if I'm editing a documentary. I try to take time off before I edit, so I distance myself from it, and I try to almost forget. And of course, I can't do that, but I try to forget what I shot, and then I try not to look back at the original script. I try to just make whatever is the best story from what I found.
I think your editing is more about the reactions of people, in terms of looks, gesture. These are like small details that sort of like
Wait,
invisible.
Did you hear me say that anywhere, or no? Because that's interesting, because
I think invisibility of editing is so crucial in most of your films.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The person who I heard that from is the great Robert Zemeckis. He said that comedy is about reactions, not about the jokes.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can have a terrible joke that's not that funny, but it's the other character's reaction to that, and that means so much to me because it's so true. It's always about the reaction, and then so a lot of my films, I always, sometimes I'll just hold on a character, even if I'm getting exposition from off screen, just to hear that, just to see that person's reaction, and that's a big deal.
So like Brooklyn sitting in the bathtub, all this, but I think it's the editing that works because the first time we don't know what happened, but when the second time comes, and we then we figured out what it is.
I think that's what makes also a movie work, is to have the audience constantly thinking.
Yeah.
And you have to be slightly ahead of your audience. And I hate that sounds very conventional, but it's true, because you want to be engaged. You don't want to just go into a movie theater and, I guess some people want to just fall asleep, but I mean, I want to be engaged. I spend money. I'm spending my time. I want to be. I want to be thinking. I want to feel as if. I hate to say this, and I'm not saying this about my films, but in the moment as a moviegoer, sometimes I want to be impressed. I want to feel as if I want to be surprised. I want to be left in the dark because I want to figure things out. I want the filmmaker to have respect for me and say, you're intelligent enough to figure this stuff out, or to fill in the blanks, or to answer some obvious questions. We don't need to answer them for you. So I kind of want sometimes the movie to feel smarter than I am. And I'm not saying that about my films, but I want, as a moviegoer, I like when I feel like.
Same for me.
Yeah.